Morning.
Yeah, so there's going to be a language element to my program, and so I like to start off using Lakota. So we would say, or I would say, Midakuye Owansi, Maka Oyate Daku Unkachiabio, Manzashambi, Ugly, Bowman, Ugly Devil. That would be in English, and my friends and relatives, thank you for spending your time with me here in Bowman. Dakota Tate Tiwashe Emachia, my everyday name is Dakota Goodhouse. Ozuye Numpa Kolia Emachia, my name in my language is two wars. Ion Woslata Imatapalo. I'm from Standing Rock. Inawaye Unkpa Lakota Kambiska Kiyoshpaye Imatapalo. On my mother's side, I am Unkpa Lakota of the White Crow Band. Adewaye Ihonkuwana Dakota Kabaska Imatapalo. On my father's side, I am Cuthead, Yanktonay, Dakota. Le Makochiki, Kateya, Na Machbia, Hechelo. Even though I've said all this, where I'm from and who I am, I like to say that I am from the land of sky and wind. And that's where we're all from. We're all from the land of sky and wind. So before I get into this, I want to share a cultural more with you. I want all of you, if you can, if you're able to, look at your fingertips. Those patterns on your fingertips are, according to our Dakota people, tell us the direction the wind was blowing on the day we were born. Yeah. The wind is such a strong part of our culture. It's shaped who we are on the Great Plains. That it really is. It's infected almost everything. And this very type of morning, this kind of day, we would say, Le Kihaniki Abaleikila Na Kiji Wanjiva Ko Hechelo. So this type of morning, this morning in particular, is a very rare, special morning, day for us, cloudless and quiet. The sky is completely blue. It's a very special day. Okay, so now I'm going to use exclusively English. All right, because it really makes me pause and think, what did I just say about what am I going to say in English? Yeah, so it really makes me stop and think. Okay, so I didn't realize I was going to focus just on the landscape and Dakota names for landscape, and then I got volunteered by Diane to talk about a couple things. And actually, this will answer a few questions that had come up in her program. So I'm delighted to share two programs with you. And we'll go through this one, and we'll get through these as quick as I can. Okay, so some of you might not be able to see this, some of you may be able to. But here's a quick breakdown of who the people are and where these stories and where this history is coming from. Into Minnesota and into part of northern Iowa, those are the Isayanti Sioux people, the Santee Sioux, the Eastern Sioux. There are 4 tribes: Sisetuan, Miniwakantan, Wakbekute, Wakbetuan. And these days we say Sisitin, Miniwakan, Wapakudi, Wapatun. Okay, Sisetuan is Fish Scale Village, Miniwakantan is Spirit Lake, Wakbekute is Shooters Among the Leaves, Wakbetuan are Dwellers Among the Leaves. Their language is Dakota. They speak Dakota. In the James River area, the Cheyenne River area, all the way down to near where Yankton, South Dakota is, those are the Middle Sioux, Most books, most historians call them Dakota or Yankton or Yankton. Their language is Wichayana, and they're a very distinct group of Dakota people. They call themselves Dakota, but their language is Wichayana. And they pronounce their two tribes, Ihanktuwana, which is Little End Village, and Ihanktuwan, which is End Village. So Yankton and Yankton. When the French came, they couldn't pronounce these words the way they pronounced them, and so it came out as Yankton and Yankton. And then the Sioux that we're probably most familiar with are the Sioux who had the high horse culture, lived in teepees, and hunted and gathered. Well, that's the Sioux who are west of the Missouri River. And they have their one council fire of 7. They're called Tetonwan. That's where we get the word Teton from. And their language is Lakota. And the Tetonwan are very numerous, and we have 7 tribes of our own. So on my mother's side, I'm Hunkpapa. That can be translated any number of ways, but it's in reference to the way the camp is set up, like a horseshoe shape with the entrance facing east. Oftentimes, this group of Lakota people, when we're in camp with other Sioux or Dakotas, Wichayana, or Lakotas, we're the first ones to camp and we're the last ones to leave. And so there's some history with that word in itself. Okay, Itazicho is without bows. For whatever reason, the French call them sans arc, which means without bows, and they've kept that name in French to this day. But they're Itazicho, without bows. Sihasapa is black-footed moccasins. In English, we just say black feet, Lakota. They were pretty warlike. They were walking across a landscape that had been charred by a prairie fire, and so their moccasins and bottoms of their leggings became charred, so they called them black feet. Many Kuwoju are one group of Lakota who had built earth lodges and farmed, and so they're not like our other Lakota people. Many Kuwoju, many Kanju, I guess they say. Uhenumba is 2 boilings, or what they call 2 kettles. They're called that because of the way they cook. They'll get a bison stomach and go down to the river and get some water and put their meat and vegetables into this kettle or pot or this bison stomach. And then they'll go to a fire, and then after carefully heating stones, they'll select 2 stones and carefully lift them and carry them and place them into the kettle to boil and cook their food. So big long explanation for this name of Lakota people, 2 kettles. The last 2, Brule, they call themselves Sichangu, and their name origin takes place right east of Bismarck. There's a place called Long Lake. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. But in 1772, there was a big fight between the Cheyenne, the Shahiala, and the Lakota people. We were not always friends and allies with each other. We used to be staunch enemies. And the Cheyenne retaliated against this group of Oglala by setting fire to the plains, and the fire caught up to this group of Oglala people and burned their legs and their feet. And they survived by jumping into Long Lake. And so from that day forward, they became known as Sichangu or Brule. And it wasn't until the 1800s that the Lakota and Cheyenne became close allies and friends of each other. We weren't always that allies and friends that's often portrayed up in the times of the Bighorn. No, we used to be staunch enemies. Okay, Ogallala means they scatter their own, and they got that name. Some say, oh, they scattered onto the plains. Well, really good book that came out in the past year called Witness. It's a Strong Heart song for history of Lakota people by Josephine Wagner. And in it is another explanation. I think it's probably the one that's probably very true. But the Oglala people are to this day a very strong-willed. And anyway, but the way she explains it in this people she interviewed was that two men were arguing, and this was true a long time ago, that when someone said you were disagreeable or spreading false words, they reach down and cup some earth in their hands and then throw it, scatter it in their faces. And so two men were probably both very aggressive in their opinions, and they had both reached down for earth and scattered this dust in each other's faces. And then at one point, the Oglala people, about 200 years ago, it was almost shameful to be Oglala. Well, about 100 years later, mid-1800s, it became a very proud thing to be Oglala. Anyway, Crazy Horse, Red Tail, or Spotted Tail, Red Cloud, or Oglala. And you've probably all heard of Sitting Bull, who's Hunkpapa, Gaul, right in the face of Hunkpapa. Okay, big explanation about who the people are. So real quickly then, I'll sum up a little bit of General Sibley's campaign. He was pursuing some Dakota people. Two of the camps that I can tell you that were involved in the 1862 Dakota conflict in Minnesota. One was Inkwakuda's camp and White Lodge's camp. Okay, so there were at least two bands of Dakota who were up by Devil's Lake and had come down towards near present-day Jamestown, North Dakota. Okay, so here, blue line there shows General Sibley's movement, and it was pretty straight line going up the Minnesota River there, across the plains there, very straight until he encounters some Lakota people. There was a drought. There was a drought for 2 years, terrible drought. So that was one of the factors that led to the starvation of the Dakotas, not just Dakotas, but the German settlers too. And then following this drought, there was an affliction of fungus that got into everyone's crops. So it wasn't just Dakota people who were starving. Settlers were starving, their crops were starved too. So it's bad conditions all around. Anyway, so on the Great Plains here, why were Teton Lakota people, right? I've identified for you where Teton Lakota people were west of the Missouri River. Why were they east of the Missouri River? Well, the drought had driven game. Let me see where this laser is. Okay, the drought had driven game north and east across the Missouri River and south. So the Teton, Hunkpapa Lakota people, this would be where Apple Creek is today. Heart River would be right around here. Knife River, roughly right about here. Anyway, Hunkpapa Lakota territory was kind of like this. It's fairly big. So Sitting Bull, Gaul, Ran the Face, and Red Tomahawk. I don't know if anyone's heard of Red Tomahawk. He was known later for killing Sitting Bull. But he was a very close friend of Sitting Bull before, 30 years before, or 20-some years before they ever became on different terms, and Red Tomahawk ever killed Sitting Bull. But anyway, so bison had driven game east, and so Hunkpapa Lakota people came east. They found hunting in the lakes scattered around the area. Dead Buffalo Lake, Big Mound, yeah, here the lakes are, Stony Lake there. The lakes had dried up to a point where it was all muddy, and so game could be chased into these muddy areas, and the bison had a difficult time getting out, so it made for favorable hunting conditions. That's why the Lakota people were there. The Dakotas from Minnesota had come down from Spirit Lake, from Minnewakanton and came down. In the Jamestown area here, there is, and I don't have a picture of it unfortunately, but there's a great big stone, probably from the ground up to about this point. It's fairly big, and it's partially submerged in the year because there's a couple dams in the Jamestown area now that submerge it. But this time of year and next month, the water will go down enough that you'll be able to see it. Well, that is a great stone directional marker, and it's a landmark. And so the Dakota people who aren't as familiar with the Great Plains would have known about this landmark. They came down from Spirit Lake looking for this particular landmark, this stone. Well, they found it, and it was just, you might call it the serendipity, but they found it just where the Yanktonay and the Teton Lakota, the Pukpapa, they all came together almost all on the same day at impromptu congruence. And just a day later come soldiers. And so there's three different groups of people, of Sioux people, and then there's soldiers that are coming. Anyway, so let's get to the conflicts themselves. Of course, Diane already shared this image of Sibley recrossing the Cheyenne River. Anyway, Cheyenne River is actually Shahialao Koju Wakpa. It's where the Cheyenne Indians used to plant. They used to live along the Cheyenne River over 300 years ago in earth lodge villages. They planted corn, squash, and beans, and there's still village sites in the Cheyenne River Valley, and it's a beautiful valley just to drive down from Valley City down to Fort Ransom. It's just a beautiful, just a beautiful land in North Dakota. Here's a painting of Sibley's campaign. This one is in the south vestibule of the Burley County Courthouse. I like going to courthouses. And I think everybody should go to courthouses, and go there before you have to have a ticket to pay. Right? Really check out your courthouses and see some of the art that's on display in your courthouses. This one's in Bismarck, and there's like Lewis and Clark. There's a Earth Lodge, there's Mandan, Lewis and Clark encountered the Mandans. Anyway, this is the one I chose with this particular program, a Sibley campaign. Since it's showing infantry and mounted infantry, it's showing also mules, donkeys, and this is pretty important when we get to the story here. Okay, so there's a big mound, Dead Buffalo Lake and Stony Lake. I want to point out that this line right here is serpentine. It's rather sinuous here. When the soldiers mounted a pursuit, the Lakota and Dakota men, they engaged the soldiers and allowed the women and children and elders to make a straight line themselves. This straight line is actually Sibley's return route to Camp Atchison up here. But the Lakota women, children, elders made a straight line to crossing the Missouri River near Apple Creek in Bismarck. And there's about 5 places where they crossed. We'll get into that in a moment. But the soldiers that engaged the warriors kept them and brought them back and forth across lakes and streams and other bodies of waters, dry, muddy creeks, because that slowed the soldiers down. And altogether it gave the women, children, and elders 2 days to cross the river. So I think this is purely intentional, ingenious, because the women and children and elders all made it across, and that's a victory. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, one famous figure was at Big Mound. This is from his own autobiography, we could say. This is a pictographic record in Sitting Bull's own pen. And it's not an image that we are familiar with Sitting Bull. However, in the picture language of the Plains Indians, Robert Utley took this image 50 years ago to the Cheyenne, the Crow, and several bands of Dakota people, and he had to verify yet again, oh, this is in fact Sitting Bull, even though he knew it already was, he just didn't verify from other people, from several sources. Anyway, it's a universal language, pictography, picture really means, it really says 1,000 words. And this particular picture, though, it doesn't look like Sitting Bull to you, but this line coming out of his mouth, that's like when you read cartoon strips, the balloon, right? Okay. So this is pictography, picture language of this figure with his name. This is a Sitting Bull. So Tatanka Iotake, this is the Sitting Bull, identified himself, but this picture, this shirt, this hair, that doesn't look like Sitting Bull. Well, he wasn't a warrior, he wasn't a chief. He was a medicine man. And this particular shirt, it would have had holes all in it, that in his belief, whenever he was shot at, bullets would go through, almost like a ghost shirt 30 years later. Okay, this style of hair that he's pictographed himself wearing, medicine men, they wore their hair, they might create a bun. They might gather their hair up, braid right here, and gather it right up here on the top. And that was a fairly universal Plains Indian hairstyle for medicine men. And so he knew exactly who he was, and he portrayed himself as a medicine man. However, all the pictures, all the known photos of Sitting Bull are of him dressed as a warrior. He has his hair arranged as a warrior. He's wearing a feather as a warrior. His leggings are as a warrior. And he was aware of this image use. He was aware of the media, of the power of media back then. And so when we talk about Sitting Bull in a contemporary sense, it's always as Chief Sitting Bull. Well, he identified himself as a medicine man. Okay, so he was at Big Mound, and he stole a mule, and he counted coup. So that's what this pictograph is. He counted coup on one of Sibley's men, and he stole a mule. Okay, that brings us up to the conclusion of Sibley's campaign in Dakota Territory, and that is this particular pictograph here. This picture here was identified by Mr. Mike Cowdery almost 20 years ago as the Battle of Whitestone Hill. Well, I disagree with that. Oh, there's a map. Okay, one moment, we'll get back to that map. Okay, well, this particular pictograph, it shows soldiers fleeing. It shows dead soldiers on the ground here, and it clearly shows a victory. Well, we know that Whitestone Hill was not a victory for Lakota people at all. From almost all of my Lakota relatives, Whitestone Hill was a massacre. But this one here shows dead soldiers and soldiers fleeing. So, but if we count up these dead soldiers' bodies, and more soldiers, 2 more soldiers here, it's 19, which happens to match the number of soldiers that Sibley lost in this campaign, not all by Lakota people. And this pictograph was painted about 30 years after this conflict, after the Sibley campaign, because, and this is a bad picture here too, but when you see the full-size copy at the State Historical Society, this pictograph has teepees arranged around 2 lakes. And these teepees this teepee village is set up as if it has perspective. And so that tells me, well, it's 30 years after historic Plains Indian pictography, because Plains Indian pictography as a traditional art form did not have perspective. And so what's so special about this? Well, it's painted after the fact. Anyway, let's get into it here. Let's get into the map. So Sibley's campaign came from the east, and it's taken a few years to put this information together. I'm still working on an even better map. My good friend Tim Reed at the State Historical Society has a better map. This map is about 30 years after the fact. It's published in 1891. The map that I'm working on with Tim Reed includes a map from the General Land Offices and a military survey in 1855. Anyway, it's closer to this one here. It gives us an idea of it. Okay. Anyway, so break it down here. The Lakota Dakota camps, they began to break up just east of Bismarck. This yellow line shows one group here of Lakota who crossed near where the present-day railroad bridge is in Bismarck. That's No Two Horns and his group, or his band of Lakota people. No Two Horns is kind of a big name. You see a lot of his stuff at the Heritage Center. Even today, you walk in there and you see a lot of No Two Horns stuff. Anyway, so he crossed over here. His father was leading the band. They crossed the river here. And No Two Horns and Red Tomahawk both say that there was this two groups of Dakota, Santee Dakota, who broke off from them and moved north. These two groups here that moved north in this green line, that is Inkpaduta and White Lodge. White Lodge. They were here. They weren't actually in this campaign, in this conflict here at Apple Creek. So what happened? The men who had held off the soldiers for a couple of days, allowing the women and children to cross, the red dotted lines here kind of break it down where the crossing was. And Sidley arrived just at the moment when he saw thousands of flashes of light going back and forth across the river here. There were thousands of flashes of light. So women had little mirror bags. So they took them bags out, took the mirrors out, and they flashed back and forth with the men. The men who stayed on this side of the river and took the hill where present-day University of Mary is at. And over the next couple of days, the soldiers engaged warriors here. About 2,000 or so soldiers engaged about 500 warriors. I think that's pretty interesting. And so the women and children crossed. At this point, I have some oral tradition to interject. This one comes from my grandmother's cousin, her first cousin, Delma Hellman. I had a chance to visit with her last year, August, before she took her journey. And she was over 90 years old. And so this right here, she had this story about this crossing right here, about her grandmother who made this crossing. Okay, and so her grandmother, her Unchi, and I couldn't ask her who her grandmother was. It'd be impolite to have her name her grandmother. In Lakota tradition belief, if you talk about someone who's already made their journey, who's already passed on, to say their name, you're calling them back. And so she would just say, my Unchi shared this, my Unchi said that. So she's talking about her grandmother, but didn't name her. Okay, anyway, so her grandmother made this crossing here as a little girl, and when they crossed the river here, the soldiers were coming, so these were amongst the last to cross. Delma's grandmother, she had the story that when the soldiers came, they were still chasing them. They chased them into the river, and this almost word for word verbatim comes from Delma now back to her grandmother. The soldiers chased them into the river. They cut reeds and held onto rocks and waited under the water for nightfall to finish making the crossing here. So this is midsummer. The sun probably didn't go down until after 9 o'clock, and they were underwater, just reading through these reeds for maybe 5 or 6 hours. And anyway, this particular story is correlated by my auntie Johanna. who got it from her grandmother, my maternal grandmother's mother, Charlene. So I'm breaking the tradition of naming my own ancestors who made their journey. But anyway, I have, and there's a few more stories that all correlate this particular crossing right here. Soldiers chasing them into the river, and people cutting reeds and holding onto stones so they can stay submerged and breathe. And the soldiers wouldn't know they were there. The other oral tradition about this crossing there comes from Kevin Mock, my uncle Kevin Mock. He is a direct descendant of Inkwaduta. And Inkwaduta, his son, so Inkwaduta himself went north. His son made the crossing with the Lakota people. So they became separated. Inkwaduta went north. His son chose to go with the people. He was a little boy, and he also was amongst the last to cross here. And he also had to cut a reed and hang on to a rock underwater until nightfall before he finished crossing the river. So sometimes when I visit our elders, I visit my relatives, they might not want to talk about these things. And I have set up a history blog where I try to record some things like this. And they are suspicious of not just sharing. I mean, they'll share, but they're suspicious of in what media it's going to be shared in. And when I say, oh, I'm going to put it on the internet, immediately it's you want to sell these stories. You're selling our history. And no, I'm not. And if any of you folks visit my site, there are no ads. I don't make anything, and I tell them that too. And with the case of Delma, she agreed. She even agreed to a recording because her own children and grandchildren hadn't seen them in an elder home for the past few years, and she wanted her grandchildren to hear that story. And so when I offered to share the story, anyway, I let her know I'm not making anything. And I just go because it needs to be recorded, it needs to be shared, otherwise it's not history, and then it's gone. Anyway, so some people I'm fortunate to convince, and others I have to just keep it to myself. So that's this amazing reconstruction of this conflict in Bismarck. There were actually, here's the two lakes. Here's the two lakes that were in that pictograph. And General Sibley ordered, he made camp slaughter out around this area, but there were rifle pits that he dug. He had his men dig. So I got to move this core of conflict. This core of conflict area has to be bigger now. It has to go about this big. That's bigger. And we're not gonna find those rifle pits now because Bismarck is just too developed. And if you visit Sibley Park, there's nothing there to even tell you about this conflict. Nothing there. Anyway, getting back to this pictograph real quick. There's a central figure in red. He has this lance, and he's wearing a bandolier, and he's wearing this particular type of headdress. Not a trailing headdress, but I went to visit my relative, my Aunt Dakota Goodhouse. She's married to Vernon Ironclad. Anyway, Lexi Vernon, my uncle Vernon, he's in his 80s now too. And I went to visit them last fall about this particular pictograph just to get it in person. Because I believe this central figure is Gaul, Chief Gaul. Of course, Gaul was not known as Pizi until a little bit later, but in the 1860s, he was Omani Luda. He walks in red. And the central figure is dressed in red. And he was also at the siege of Fort Rice, and he was also called at that time walks in red, and he wore a brilliant scarlet shirt when he led that attack at Fort Rice. And that's why Fort Rice is pretty much abandoned. No, I'm teasing. No. Anyway, but he became known as Gaul too, but he had other names, and this is one of them, Walks in Red. And of course, Sitting Bull was a medicine man at the time, and I believe it was Gaul who led all these Dakota, all these, you can see this camping here, here's the two lakes. And here is a Vision Quest site. This is on private property today, just east of University of Mary. There's a hill there on the late Bob Singer's land, and while he was still alive, he allowed me to go out on his land and go up on that hill there, and you can see, you can kind of see where those, where the Missouri River was, you can see the landscape. Anyway, I really believe instead that this is not the battle of White Stone Hill. This is in fact the battle, because this is the battle, and battle implies equal chance, or there's a chance for either side to win. This is truly a battle, and not a massacre. This is a battle of Apple Creek. And I say battle freely, I use that term freely, not massacre, because 500 warriors against 2,000 soldiers, holding the soldiers out for a couple of days. Who really won that particular conflict? Simply wrote a little bit that they withdrew. He withdrew his command, and at the point of withdrawal, he couldn't fight anymore. The women and children were saved. The Dakota warriors had withdrawn themselves. To me, that just says victory. The one victory in the Sibley-Sully campaign, and that was here at Apple Creek. Okay. That central figure then, again, is Gaul. At least I believe it's Gaul. I had a bunch of pictures together, stitch them together of Apple Creek. So this is looking west, and this is north. The rifle pits would have been right around over here. It's been all developed over now. There's a school, housing, a United Tribes Technical College. We'll probably never recover anything like that. Any more development, just losing this particular story. There's a view from University of Mary, looking across the river towards Sibley Park. And again, there's no signage there to even talk about this. But standing there on the sandy banks there, it's a beautiful, beautiful sight. You know, and Winchie Delma Hellman's story just came back to me about how they had a cross at that point. Anyway, and here's a view. I was within the same hour later looking from the sandbar down below, looking up towards New Mary, and this just gives you a view of two different perspectives. This is where the warriors were, and this is where the soldiers were here, or this is where the warriors were looking down, and this is where the soldiers were looking up. Okay, I think that's it for this one. Okay, we'll get started with the next one here. I think we still have some time, do I? Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, any questions? Okay, in the back there.
What's the origins of the pictograph?
The origins, okay, the one with Sitting Bulls, he did that himself, but the big pictograph of the conflict, the author is unknown, the artist is unknown. I don't even have an idea.
And it's housed in his mark?
A copy of it is housed. I don't know if Tim or anyone has even been able to track it down.
It was up for sale at Sotheby's.
That's right. The original was in a private collection now. It did go, because Mike Calvary translated interpreted the pictograph for Sotheby's in 1994, right? And it went on sale to a private collector for about $15,000. I thought, was there another hand?
Yes. In Sitting Bull's representation of himself as a medicine man, you said he comes from food. And my understanding of that is there's a long line from his hand to the, past the shoulder of the apparently white man? That's a stick, isn't it?
It is a stick, yes, yes, he touched that, the mule steer. He touched it with the stick. Yeah. So he was still brave, but he knew himself to be a medicine man.
Right.
And he did not depict himself at all as a warrior, but he was doing a warrior's act. Yeah, good observation. Okay, so now, what I was slated to talk about, landscape, place names and stories. We'll see how far I get here. Okay, I explained about who we are, and here's the landscape where we're at. Okay, the wind really is part of the culture of the plains here. I initially wanted you to look at your fingertips at this point, but we already did that. There's a breakdown of who we are again. Titanwan is Hunkpapa, Inkazi Chos, Sihasapa, Mini Kawoshu, Uhenumpa, Ogalala, and Sichanku. So, of the seven, then, I should explain that. 7 council fires. Titanwan is one. The Yangtene or Ihanktawan is another. Ihanktawan is another. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And today we are spread up into Canada and Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Nebraska. So we're really spread out all together. There's 32 reserves and reservations, and a collective population of nearly 250,000 people in the states and Canada who identify as being Lakota, or part Dakota. Okay, let's see. Hunkpapa, this has little to do with North Dakota. You know this landmark. This is in Wyoming, but there's a tie here to North Dakota, in particularly this particular landmark with Whitestone Hill. Why do these 2 landmarks have anything to do with each other? Well, here's the story. Okay, in the origin of trying to find out names of our people and when we got these names, there's 2 oral stories about Hunkpapa and where we got the story name from. A long time ago, the Oglala say that there's a group of Oglala who went north and went along the river Minnesota, the Missouri River, and went north and kind of became separated from the Oglala. And we were gone so long that this northern group of Lakota people, they called the Oglala came to call us Inkpapkapka. That means they're upstream of us. And at some point, so that's one story of it, that Hunkpapa used to be called Inkpapka. And so the other story is that this group of Oglala traveled north and west and back south again to this particular landmark, Devil's Tower, Bear Lodge, or Hotila. And so they made camp here, and because they made camp, this is one tip of the horn, one tip of the Lakota Hunkpapa camp, and they were called Heinumpapkaha. Heinumpapkaha. And that became contracted, they say, to Hunkpapa. And so there's this other story. Is it true? I don't know. But there's 3 pronunciations: Heinumpapkaha, Inkpapkaha, and Hunkpapka. Anyway, so that the other tie of this particular landmark, this Devil's Tower, I mentioned Whitestone Hill. These are 2 places where they say the white buffalo Catwoman has appeared to the Lakota people. And at one point, she came here to us and appeared and brought a gang of bison to our camp because we were starving. I don't know the conditions that led to starvation, but the first time she appeared, they say, was at Whitestone Hill. So this is not a story that's unknown, but this is a story that very few people share, even amongst my own Lakota people. And I'm sharing it with you, is that at Whitestone Hill, there's a lake. There's a lake with a peninsula that reaches into the lake, and it's shaped kind of like an L shape, like a crooked L shape, like a lazy L. And that shape of that peninsula is supposed to be in the shape of a pipe. And according to the Brown Hat Winter Camp, the Kopesha Hi Waniye Wowahi, Lila Waniye Ihani, Tehi Chaw San Ahi Kaliko. So in English that would all be, they say a long, long time ago in this very special place was where the white buffalo calf woman brought the gift of the pipe. And so they say that she brought this pipe to the Lakota people at that place, Whitestone Hill, and to be a physical demarcation of her arrival. That peninsula was formed in the lake that is shaped like a pipe. So there's a funny story about that site too. And that we know that there was a tragedy there, but about almost 100 years ago, when the Dakota people were taken back to Whitestone Hill to commemorate the site, there's a huge gathering. There's all kinds of pictures. There's a huge gathering. Reverend Aaron Mead, who's the Episcopal minister in Fort Yates, was there offering translation or interpretation, and he translated for a few individuals. One of which, they all three, I should say, all agreed that where Whitestone Hill is marked today as a state historic site is not where the conflict occurred. It occurred south and east of where they say the conflict, where the main encampment was. So I just think that's interesting. But why was there such a push to preserve the area where the state historic site is today? And I think that the Lakota and Dakota had this agenda that if there was anything that could be preserved at that site, it should be that lake. So that lake doesn't have anything to do with the conflict that happened, But when did that happen? Okay, well, I mentioned Winter Count. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of them, but it's a pictographic record. And each picture represents a story and a year, and the pictures are arranged in a spiral. And so we count back from years that we know, we go back further and further, 1876, so that's the year that Custer died, that's the year that Longhair died. We go back, that's the year the stars were going crazy in the sky. It's 1833. We go back further. That's the year that there were some men who came up the river, and we held council to decide whether or not to allow them to pass. Well, that's 1804. That's when Lewis and Clark came up the river. Anyway, we go back further and further. That year we first saw the horse, 1692. So you get the idea. We go back to these pictures and count backwards, and suddenly we get to this Brown Hat Winter Count that goes back and back and back, all the way to when the white buffalo calf woman appeared, and that is the year 901. So do Dakota people have recorded history? Yes, we do. And it goes back about 1,100 years. That's amazing. We do have recorded history. And it goes back that far and places the arrival of that gift of the sacred pipe at Whitestone Hill. That's why it's such a sacred site. I don't know if Diane, you ever heard that story or not. Okay. All right, let's move on. Itazicho, they got their name near present day Little Bighorn. And those are the Bighorn Mountains there in the distance. They got their name without bows when there was a war party that came to a camp where all the men were out hunting and gathering, and one boy who was too young to go on his first war party or first hunting expedition, he stayed back and he was very upset. And so a war party came, and this young boy went down to the creek. And the war party came into the village. Everyone was, all the women jumped in their lodges to pack up, what's going to happen. And this little boy, this young man, this Koshkala, he could have been a young teenager. That's an English word. young man, boy, whatever. But he's probably 13, 14 years old. Okay. Anyway, Kushkala, a young man, a boy, he went down to the creek and he started making all kinds of noise, started hollering, and his voice started carrying across the landscape. And this war party that came to attack, since it's in this particular country, we could surmise that it's Shoshone or Crow. Okay, so whoever this war party was, they heard what seemed to be a bigger war party from all directions around them. And so they quit fighting and they withdrew from the camp. All the women came out. What happened? They're looking for their loved ones, their man on the horizon. No one revealed themselves, but they could hear. It sounded like a huge war party. And these enemies sent out men to circumvent the area, look around, where are they at? And they discovered it was just one boy creating all this noise that made them think that there was a war party nearby. And they were so embarrassed with themselves that they stopped fighting, and they all went over, and they gave that boy the victory of that fight. He fought without a bow, and he convinced the whole war party that there was a war party, and there wasn't. Anyway, so this particular group of Oglala then on became known as those without bows. And they became, anyway, it was a band of Dakota people that if anyone was from there, they were very proud to be from that band. So they became known as those without bows from that point. Okay, Sichangu, I mentioned they jumped into this Long Lake here. Here's Long Lake. It's a national wildlife refuge today. This is on the western side of it, where I believe that where the camp of Sichangu, the burnt eyes, they jumped into this lake there to survive. Quick breakdown here of landscape then. Okay, so at this point, I probably should have started with this too. We would say, what would we say? I'm trying to figure it out here. Lakota now, not the Lakota train of thought. This would be so how yeah, there you go. In English, that would be welcome to the River of Elk Country. That's what this country is here, where Bowman is at. Okay, so we have this nice map here, the dirty water, Mini Shoshe, that's the Missouri River, Cedar River, it's the Cannonball River, Hart Creek. So these have all been kind of translated for us already, but where is it? Where are we at here? Owl Creek, Good Creek. Mini Wakpa, this is the Cheyenne River today. This is from this point up to Chankli Wakpa up north and west. That is Powder River. Back along Mini Shoshe down to Chande Wakpa, which is Hart River, and again to Wakpawashe, Good River. This is the Hunkpapa Tazimsho country right here. Makoche le Makoche ki Hunkpapa na Tazimsho Hechelo. That's the country of the Hunkpapa without bow people. Yeah. Anyway, so there's all these names here in the landscape. Rivers, streams have all these Lakota names. Black Hills, Kesapa, just Black Hills. Some good ones here. Let's see if I got some. Oh, there we go. Here's a nice list. Mini Oahe, that's a recent landmark name of Lakota people. In the 1950s, the Army Corps of Engineers decided to build this beautiful land. They started to build this land, a wonderful lake. And then it flooded Standing Rock. And then they let the people of Standing Rock decide what to name the lake that formed. And they did the same thing at Fort Berthold. It build a dam. Oh, it flooded the reservation. Well, let's let them name this new lake, right? Okay, so we have this wonderful honor naming this lake, Lake Oahe. And it sounds wonderful. And, you know, as a kid growing up, I remember going down the river, seeing, you know, fishers going by. I remember one guy pulling over and saying, Lake Oahe, what's that mean? It sounds beautiful. It sounds exotic. Where are you from? I'm from California. This Lake Oahe almost sounds Hawaiian. It sounds beautiful. And I said that it means lake something to stand on. And what's that mean? Well, when the water and the floods came, all the people had to move away and abandon townships. And when the river receded before flooding again, all that was left of buildings were the foundations, something to stand on. So for Lakota people, Lake Oahe has kind of a sinister implication. It's not supposed to sound beautiful. Anyway, I can laugh about it now. Okay. Ihakatawakpa, that is the River of Elk. That's this country here. That is the Little Missouri River. It was also called Big Timber River. Milawakpa, that's Knife River. Shantewakpa, Heart River. Shahialawakpa, Red Talker River. Shahiala or Koju Wakpa. My notes have been amended to say that it's Cheyenne River today. Cheyenne River with an S. Cheyenne River, that's North Dakota. To differentiate from the Cheyenne River with a C in South Dakota. Chasansa Wakpa. Oh, I love that name. That is James River. Chasansa is White Birch River. The locals from Valley City down towards Fort Ransom, they say when this word is in signage, they pronounce it Can San San. And it just sounds funny to go Can San San. Yeah, Chasansa, it's White Birch River. Okay. Minisha Wakapa. Minisha is the Red Water River. And originally that country was called Makoche Washe, the good country. And they say a long time ago that there was a man, his name was Nape, who came and introduced vice to the Dakota people and killing. The people were Ikcheon Chachaloyaka, they were common men, common people. But Nape made the Dakota people warlike. And so they began killing, as people settlers, they began killing other Indian tribes, began becoming dominant, aggressive, and hostile. And so so many people were killed along that area that the rivers, the tributaries of this one river ran red with blood. And they knew it ever afterwards as Red River, Red Water River. I went to Sisseton, Washington last weekend, and there was a 92-year-old elder woman, and I asked her about this, and she said, yeah, it should be this area here, that river, that country, this whole area should be Makoche Washe. And someday I hope it's known as that again. Anyway, good country is what it's supposed to be. Long Lake, I've already shared that with you. Tashpala Wakapala, that's Thorn Apple Creek. There used to be this whole area along Apple Creek in Bismarck there. It was just filled with wild thorn apple bushes. Thorn Apple Creek. Minnewakan, that's water with energy. Spirit Lake, that's what that is today. Minichawakan, that's water, wood with energy. That's Spirit Wood, just east of Jamestown. And Jamestown and Spirit Wood Lake, that whole area was known for being a favorite place to make, to pluck, what was it, branches from chokecherries to make arrows with. It was known just for that. That also actually might be a reason why the Dakota were coming down from Spirit Lake in 1863. They were coming south, probably could have been coming down to harvest, to make arrows, because it was known just that that area was known just for that. Good wood for making arrows. Okay. Many Najuspe Haweka, that's Broke Axe Lake. That's a landmark that nobody uses anymore, not even our own people, our own Indian people. Today it's called Painted Woods. That's a site of a tragic love story, a Romeo and Juliet love story between a Yanktonese Dakota and a Mandan Indian woman, long time ago. And just like Romeo and Juliet, this little couple died in each other's arms. But that's a story for another time. Okay, Pine Butte, and some of these, this is a nice list of buttes here that are, some of them are right in this area here. Let's see here, Waji Pine Butte, that's in the west, this part of the state. Itaziba Okashki, bows cut with axe. That's a butte here in this part of the state. Shukamani Tutanka Paha, there's two of these. There's one near this area, Hedinger area here. I think this is just by Hedinger. And then there's another wolf butte on the other side of Lake Kagawea. Chakwapaha, that's twin buttes. Chandepaha, there's 3 buttes with that particular name. One in the city of Mandan. There's one out here, actually, and not out here, by Elgin. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to bore you folks with all these names of stuff here, but it's just a little collection of landmark names. The idea behind this is that the Dakota Lakota people have this landmark identity, and it's once military came, the settlers came, in mass afterwards. But once military came, once our Dakota people were put on agencies, the landscape became appropriated not just by force, but the landscape became renamed. And it just knowing some of these names, it really shows that we knew these places by other names, but we knew them for other things, and we knew them for collecting wood for arrows, or we knew them as places to pray. We knew them as battle sites with other tribes. So out here in this part of the country, in this part of the state, in Bowman here, there's like 5 different buttes that were known for conflict with the Crow Indians. And Crow Indians used to live out here, and our Dakota people pushed them out too. So it's just a human nature story. Humans just do that to each other. Okay, now I conclude. I think it's time I should conclude. But since we are in North Dakota, this is the Great Plains. You all have seen this before, right?
Yes.
Okay, the sundial, right? Okay. A quick short story here. Wonderful story of the Great Plains. The backstory is, I was last year, February, I was driving my son to school, my youngest son. And he's, of my 3 sons, he's the one who is most interested in our language and culture. And we see one of these outside the window, and he says, "Dad, what's that?" And I said, "Oh, that's a sundial." And he says, No. What do we call it? And it made me feel really good. And so I said, we ache ichiri himachiapi. So we call that the sun makes a campfire for itself. And then he said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "I don't know." And so for the next year, I asked elders at Spirit Lake, Sisseton, Wabaton, Pine Ridge, Rosebud, Santee in Nebraska, Crow Creek in South Dakota, and Cheyenne River. And then I went, finally, 28 people I asked before I went back to Fort Yates, and was in my uncle's home. And I just happened to ask about a sundial because we saw one outside. And I said, Tokel, we are Che and my uncle, he knows I'm still learning my language yet. He said, look, he answered me in English too. He said, it's a good thing you asked me this. What do we call why do we call it the sundog? Why do we call it the sun makes a campfire for itself? And he said that my grandfather and my grandfather's brother, my Lala Innocent and my Lala Eddie, they were brothers. They had this story that they got from their Lala before them, their grandfather. And if I hadn't asked, my uncle wouldn't have remembered to share with his children and grandchildren, and my aunt too, after I said, oh yeah, that story. And she said, oh yeah, I forgot I remembered that. I forgot I knew that. Anyway, so I'm finding this to be a wonderful experience to ask people stories and things before they're gone. Anyway, but here's the story. They say a long time ago it was cloudy and gray for several days, and it began to affect people's attitudes in waking time. It began to affect their dreams when they were asleep. And so this one man got up and left the village and went out to pray. And in those days, that's what people did. They went out to sequester themselves and pray. And after a while, this man came back into the village, and he called everyone together. And you remember, our Hunkpapa camps are set up like so, like a horseshoe. So in the center of camp, he called everyone together, and he selected two groups of young people to go out east of the village and to instruct them to build two campfires like so. After they got these campfires going, they were called back into the center of the village where everyone came together and prayed. And as morning led on, the sun at one point broke through. So they say that the sun, the day star, it broke through and shined beautiful and bright with this brilliance, and it made the people feel good. And so as they were praying, and as the sun began rising into the sky, the campfires on the eastern end of the village rose up into the sky with the sun. And that's why we have the campfires of the sun. That's that story. Yeah, and it's a wonderful story, a wonderful testament to the Great Plains, because only here does the sun need help in the winter. Yeah, okay. Good note to end on, I think. Okay. I think I've gone over my time. I'm sorry. Is there time for questions, Lord? Okay. Are there any questions?
I had the question from the prior speaker.
Oh.
I don't know if you heard that, but I have family in the eastern McLean County area around the town of Butte, and there's a large butte there called Dogger Butte. And it was said that after the Battle of Kilder Mountain, the Sitting Bull's clan retreated to that high spot. Any knowledge of that?
Yeah. They call that Wolf Butte too. There's two Wolf Buttes. That's one of them where the White Crow band, Sitting Bull's band, Kambiska Kioshwaye and made camp. But that Sitting Bull, Gall, Rain Face, Red Tomahawk, they were there for maybe a few days. The most pressing need was to hunt. And so in the next month and a half from that particular site, all through the Badlands and all through the major butte sites here in western North Dakota, they hunted to replenish their meat supply and to get hides to build lodges for the coming winter. Yeah, it was overtime to hunt. I couldn't tell you much more than that, though. That particular butte, though, the thing about discovering these names of these landmark sites is that it provokes tribal memory. And so when I say, oh, Dog Dead Butte, Wolf Butte, these particular buttes, those two buttes, the two Wolf Buttes or Dog Dead Buttes, those were Sundance sites for our Dakota people. It was it's a very, very special site that's, that your family here lives by. And I couldn't tell you more than that. All right, good question, sir, right here, way in the back of the
Do
company.
you have a name or any history on the Rainy Buttes?
Oh, yeah. Just a little bit. That was a battle site between the Crow Indians and our Lakota people. Yeah, that's one of the sites here, all the way down to Crow Buttes in South Dakota here. It's just the 1850s and 60s were filled with warfare with the Crow Indians. In fact, from 1854 through 1865, the Hunkpapa Lakota weren't just concerned with hunting and gathering, but almost continuously making war on the Crow Indians, driving them from this particular land, this particular country, this region, west, and they didn't like that very much. Yeah, so that's a battle set, a huge battle set between Lakotas, Hunkpapa Lakotas, and Crow Indians. I couldn't tell you more than that. Sir,
What does Boachi mean in Sioux?
what does what?
Boachi.
Lowachi? If it was Wowachi, I would say that's a dance. Lowachi is, I could not tell you.
I'm hungry.
Maybe there's something's missing with that. Yeah, maybe if it's a phrase you're saying, it should be Lowachi Owoka. That's I'm hungry. Let's eat now. Yeah. Okay. I should end here. I want to thank Bowman County Historical Society for inviting me out here. Dean, I just thank you for having me here. And Historical Society, City Historical Society people, and Lori Orner. Lori's a former co-worker of mine from our days at Fort Lincoln State Park. She's a good person to work with, and you guys couldn't have a better person to work with out here. Thank you.